Hello and welcome back to the video. Today we're talking about the first of my updated league guides getting ready for FIFA 22. We're going to be talking about the Championship. So in this video I'm going to go through any changes to the rules, the new teams that have come up from League 1 or been relegated from the Premier League, and any interesting players that might be joining the league in the next couple of months. So let's get started with the 6 clubs that aren't going to be in the league next year. So Norwich, Watford and Brentford have all been promoted to the Premier League. They all had very similar transfer styles where they like to use Moneyball and statistics to get promoted, so that's obviously a good thing for doing in this league, maybe something you should incorporate if you decide to play in it. Getting relegated to League 1, you have probably the 2 smallest teams in the league, Wycombe and Rotherham, and then unfortunately Sheffield Wednesday, who are actually a fairly big team. If you enjoyed playing as any of these teams, unfortunately you're going to have to move down to League 1, but that's not to say that league's bad. It's also got some very interesting teams and it's probably even more fun than the Championship, but I'll cover that in a different guide. So that's the 6 teams that left the league. Who is going to be featuring in next year's Championship? Well, promoted from League 1, you've got Hull City, Peterborough United and Blackpool. These are fairly decent teams too. Peterborough United always have really good transfers, especially at striker. They've had people like Craig Smith, Britta Sombalonga, Ivan Toney is probably the most famous example recently. Blackpool have made it back from League 2 all the way back up to the Championship, so they're going to be trying to get back into the Premier League like they were at the start of the last decade. Hull City are another fairly big team in the league. They've been in the Premier League recently, they have a real stadium on the game, and like the others, they have some fairly interesting transfer policies that we might cover in the rest of this video. So these are going to be the new teams that you can start your career mode with in the Championship on FIFA 22. But who else is going to be an interesting team to pick in next year's save? Well, Blackpool is probably one of the most interesting ones. Of course, they have that nice orange kit, but we've already mentioned them. Bournemouth have spent another year in the league. They have a really good squad. They also have quite a big budget because their owner is so rich. Both Derby County and Nottingham Forest will be trying to battle at the other end of the league after disappointing campaigns this year, but Derby County might be starting with a points deduction depending on how their tribunal goes with the EFL. That could make the Rams even harder of a save than they already are, because they don't actually have that many players in the squad, and the ones that they have kept aren't actually that great. But still, I feel like FIFA will give them a lot of high potential players, so you'll have to develop these players, because I can't imagine you'll have a huge transfer budget either, and try to push as high up the league using your youth academy as you can. If you'd like an easier challenge rather than trying to take Derby to glory, you could use one of the 3 relegated Premier League teams we mentioned earlier. Fulham, West Brom and Sheffield United will all have very big budgets for the level and also have 3 of the best squads in the league. All 3 of these teams of course will have their stadiums in the game, but a couple of other teams in the league will too. For example, Stoke have theirs in the game, Middlesbrough, Cardiff do too, and there are a couple of others in the league like Huddersfield and Swansea that make it in there as well. So if you are interested in real leagues, outside of the top flight of England and Spain, the Championship probably has the most stadiums per team in the whole game. According to some gambling websites, Fulham and West Brom are the favourites to go up, and the hardest challenge in the league will be getting Blackpool, Peterborough and Luton out of relegation. The bookies also see Huddersfield, Preston and Coventry struggling this season, so again these could be some of the hardest teams if you pick one of these 6. Moving on to the rules of the game, and there have actually been a couple of different changes since I made my last video. A couple of these don't really impact FIFA. For example, goalposts and the crossbar being a combination of 4 basic shapes means that you can have a different style of goalpost and net. But the only thing that could really affect any games in the Championship this year is the one on the penalty kick rule, where if a goalkeeper comes off his line and the striker still misses without the goalkeeper touching it, it doesn't count as an offence for the goalkeeper to come off his line. But again, not really something that's too important for FIFA. The one that would affect FIFA would be the 5 substitution rule, and I'm not sure if that's actually going to be sticking around for next season. The current season started off with the 3 substitution rule again after COVID brought it back up to 5, and now they've resumed having 5 after a couple of games this season. Another change that can come into the football next year is that Championship clubs are only allowed to select 25 players for their 46 game campaigns. It's going to be even smaller for League 1 and League 2 teams, but at the minute 25 is the limit for the Championship. This is the same as the Premier League. So if you get a good enough balance in the Championship and get promoted, you could even take the exact same squad up to the Premier League and it would still be legal. So that's a good change from last year, where you could have 40, 50 players if you had enough money to actually pay their wages every single week. So that's the clubs in the league and that's the rules of the league. What else is there to think about? Well, youth academy players, still exactly the same. I'd scout the British Isles and Ireland. Although recently there has been more of an impact of French footballers coming across from Ligue 2 in France. So maybe consider scouting France too, so you can get some of the young players straight into your academy. There's still quite a nice balance of North German and Scandinavian players coming across too, and a couple from Switzerland and Austria. So if you can find players from this kind of region, it would make sense to have maybe one or two of them in your squad, just because it's fairly realistic. There's been a lot more turnover of managers coming from different teams in the league. So for example, if you're managing Sheffield United, your manager is actually Slaviska Jokanovic, and he's currently managed a couple of different teams in the league, most notably Watford for a year and Fulham for 3. So it might be worth looking at the Fulham and Watford teams to see if there's any players he managed when he was there and bringing them over to Sheffield United. You can do this with so many different managers in the league. For example, Jonathan Woodgate, he was at Middlesbrough for a long time. You've got Nigel Pearson, maybe you could pick up some Leicester players. Mick McCarthy was at Ipswich and Wolves for so long. Wayne Rooney with Everton as a player. Scott Parker with West Ham and Chelsea. Neil Warnock with any team in the league pretty much. Gary Rowett, Millwall manager, could get people from Derby or Birmingham. Or even Chris Hughton getting players from Brighton. But that's just some examples of managers' former teams that you can go back and get some players, and it can be fairly realistic that they would do that. Finally, I'd like to talk about some of the new rivalries in the league. Blackpool and Preston have a pretty big rivalry in the northwest, so that could be a new interesting one to look out for. You've also got in the West Midlands, you've also got West Bromwich Albion and Birmingham City, who are going to be back at it again as the only new major rivalry that's been caused by promotions and relegations this year. So that's my post-season update to the EFL Championship. There's going to be some new interesting teams, mainly Blackpool in my opinion, who will be pretty interesting, but it'll also be interesting to see how Sheffield United get back on in the EFL Championship. They were so reliant on former manager Chris Wilder to get promoted. We'll see how Jokanovic can do in his first season in charge. So hopefully it's going to be an interesting season coming up. Obviously, as a fan of a team in the Championship, Nottingham Forest, I always want to see my team do well, and fingers crossed we might actually do well this time. But it's going to be interesting no matter what, just because of the new teams, like there always is every year. But we've also lost some of the bigger teams, unfortunately, in Sheffield Wednesday, Norwich getting promoted, and Brentford being so interesting. So we're going to have to see how the new dynamics sort of play out with new, better teams. Maybe better, worse teams. I definitely think the 3 teams coming up are all better than the likes of Wickham and Rotherham. So you're going to be finding out how good is Peterborough's scouting, how good is Hull City's management team, are they as dominant as they seemed in League 1, can Blackpool get promoted again, make it from League 2 to Premier League in I think about 5 seasons. There's so much interesting stuff happening in the Championship this summer, getting ready for next year. And I hope you all consider starting a save in the Championship. But that's all we have for today's video. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to try and do update videos for all my other leagues and try and get the rest of the leagues done ready for FIFA 22 so you get your saves ready in advance. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.